Over the course of the 25 plus years that I've been a toy collector and a toy maker, I've kept a diary, a journal of figures that I've wanted, of figures that would complete a certain collection I want, or dream figures that I might want, so that as they come out, I've been able to check them off. It's kind of been a fun way of tracking my hobby. And one of the things I did back right when I started with Mattel is I made kind of a short list of all of the toy lines that I thought would be great that don't exist. Now, some of these have actually been made since I made this list, and some of these ones that have been made have actually failed. So I wanted to kind of look at some of those because there was a time when I thought these brands would be great toy lines, but time proved me wrong. So first up, Firefly or Serenity, brown coating, whatever you want to call it. It has everything that would make a great toy line. It doesn't have too much violence, it doesn't have too much adult situations, and it's got a lot of cool action and space, and there's been a couple attempts to make toy lines based on this property. I mean, it obviously has a very large fan following, and while the movie line left a lot to be desired, there's been others. There's been the Funko Reaction line, there has been a gorgeous 12-inch figure of Malcolm Reynolds, and then, of course, we have the Funko 6-inch line, which is, I think, kind of what everyone wanted. Marvel Legends-esque versions of Firefly characters. I love how Marvel Legends has kind of become a all-encompassing term for the form factor these days. Anyway, yeah, so whether you want your mechanic or your gunslinger, Firefly was all set for you from Funko, except they never finished the team. And a big part of this, and the reason the line ended, well, the fans are louder than they are numerous. And I wish they weren't, because I'm a brown coat. I love Firefly. But when you don't have a big enough fan base, you can't carry sales. And it feels like Firefly should have that kind of fan base. But even when they made a movie, fans didn't show up. Although that scene where Matthew McConaughey gets ripped apart by Reavers, awesome! Alright, so yeah, there was a movie. It didn't do too well. And if the movie isn't going to do well based on the TV show, how do you think the merchandise is? Yes, there's characters that were great for space, fantasy, action, adventure. But when the fan base doesn't exist, it's strong. Maybe had the show continued and actually gotten more than one season, well, maybe we would have had a larger fan base and hence could have had the entire team done as a toy line instead of just a few of them. All right, the next up is Rick and Morty. While not on my original list, because it wasn't out at the time, it did get added, and figures did eventually come out for Rick and Morty. We had major characters, we had minor characters, but this toy line has also since gone away. Another one that Funko actually brought out. Now, Rick and Morty has a lot of elements that would also be great for toys, like infinite versions of characters, which if you look at something like World of Springfield, this is key to an animated line doing well, is to keep the main characters out there. Of course, you want to have secondary characters for world building, humor, and, well, just shelf presence, but the key to doing any line is keeping major characters available at retail. And Rick and Morty has this concept built into the DNA of the IP, of the content in spades. I mean, it literally embraces the concept of alternate realities and alternate versions of characters. So why didn't this toy line take off with all that built-in awesomeness? Part of it, I think, is the scale, that the figures didn't really fit in with any other scale out there. But also, I think sometimes when you do animated figures, it's tough to translate that into plastic, especially with, those giant eyes, if you will, that Rick and Morty is known for. Oh, yeah, and then there's the whole sex and violence thing. Yeah, not appropriate for kids, and when you don't have kids watching a show because it's not appropriate for them, as well as characters that are kind of designed to look like, I guess, naughty bits, shall we say, they can do things like, one-off items to promote the show, but it's a little hard to get into the toy aisle when all of your characters and their things kind of have, not exactly kosher looks. All right, Game of Thrones. Why did this not work as a toy line? Again, it feels like it's got everything baked into it for a successful product line. You've got heroes, you've got villains, you've got animals, dragons, castles. It's a concept and a motif that has been a basic, fantasy play is right up there with firefighters and spacemen. And yes, I know the show didn't exactly have the greatest ending. I'm with you, all my book buds out there, still reading and waiting for Winds of Winter. But even when the ratings were super high for seasons 4, 5, and 6, Game of Thrones still couldn't keep product on the shelf. That is toy product. And the reason being, and this is multiple companies all attempting this. I mean, we had no less than 3 different companies working on 6-inch and 7-inch action figures with different levels of articulation and accessories. So why can't a toy line that's basically just, sword and sorcery, dragons versus knights not work, especially when you have distribution at things like Barnes and Noble to, again, appeal to that original book crowd, as well as younger skewing items like the Reaction line that included an awesome wall display base that had I think, a working elevator and came with an exclusive Tyrion figure. Everything should have an exclusive Tyrion figure. Well, even the help of The Mandalorian wasn't going to be enough because, Game of Thrones, as has lots of violence and lots of naughty bits. And again, that's going to be something like Rick and Morty that can't be shown to kids. Now, R-rated concepts can work as toy lines. RoboCop is a great example. But that's when the concept itself is just so basic. And yes, there's some violence and, gore in RoboCop, but that's not really what showed up in the kids' action figure line. Well, 1, the kid line was based on the animated series, not the movie. But 2, the reason it works...
The head goes on the head! It's all so obvious now!
...is because it is so simple. RoboCop is, it's a robot meets cop. And while there are real-world versions of this, they definitely don't have that cool-looking armor that the actual RoboCop does. So let's just say he takes the concept and makes it look really cool. And that's enough for a kid. They get it. Cop, robot, done. 2 things that I like, 2 things I can understand. Now, Game of Thrones obviously has this in the concept of medieval warfare, magic, dragons, etc., etc., and, even if you're a Dungeons & Dragons fan, you're still going to find some things that appeal to you with this. But while it is high fantasy, and there's a lot of high fantasy toys out there, that's basically the issue. There's other acceptable product for parents to get. If your kid wants a dragon, you can buy them a dragon that holds their toothbrush. You don't have to have one that, necessarily rips their head off right before somebody takes off their clothes. So, dragon toys, hugely popular. R-rated Game of Thrones, well, I know TV shows aren't R-rated, but if it was a movie, it would be R-rated. And there's plenty of knights, Moon Knights, Black Knights, Dark Knights. If you want to have dragons versus knights or, just a medieval fantasy as a child, there's plenty of IP to explore, and a lot that's less violent and less, naughty bits. Okay, maybe Monty Python's not the best example for less violence, but at least the violence is done in humor. So, no lack of castle-themed toys out there, which is why you really don't need Game of Thrones. You don't need to pay extra money for the license, and it's not appropriate for kids, and that's what kills it. You have to have kids. Adults only just aren't enough to keep a brand at retail, and all 3 of these were just not enough kid audience for various reasons to keep it at market. I hope this was an interesting video, a look at 3 properties that, from my recollection, should have worked at retail, but I understand now why they didn't, and I'm glad to share that with you. If you have any other questions, leave them in comments below. Are there other lines that you've seen that should have survived at retail that you think but didn't? Let me know what they are in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.